Hey guys, tonight we slip into the gaslit underbelly of Belle Époque Paris, a place where powdered wigs and powdered noses mix with champagne breath and whispered propositions. You're standing at the edge of Montmartre, just past midnight. The cobblestones glisten with leftover rain and spilled absinthe. Somewhere behind red velvet curtains, a soprano is hitting a note high enough to make your teeth ache, and just down the alley, someone's getting slapped for the wrong kind of compliment. The air smells like cheap perfume, cigar ash, and something. More primal fear, maybe, or anticipation. Either way, you probably won't survive this with your innocence intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you all are listening from. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk past the Moulin Rouge, feathers and legs flashing behind the stained glass windows. The girls are laughing, but it's the calculated laughter of women who have made desire their currency. One of them leans out, her corset creaking like an old ship, and locks eyes with you. She winks not because she wants you, but because she knows she could have you, if the price were right. This is her stage, and you're just walking through it. It's easy to romanticize the Belle Époque. The age of Art Nouveau, of electric light blooming across the skyline like artificial stars. But it's also the age of syphilis, of cocaine tonics, of opera boxes where affairs begin and end before the second act. And at the center of it all are the courtesans, the night queens. Not quite wives, not quite sex workers, they hover in a glittering limbo, adored and despised in equal measure. They are history's most glamorous contradictions. You follow the scent of violets and cigar, smoke to a townhouse tucked between a hat shop and a brothel, though honestly, it's hard to tell the difference. Inside, everything is plush. Velvet drapes, gold leaf mirrors, and a chaise longue that's probably seen more political betrayals than Parliament. A woman lounges there, swathed in silks the color of bruises. Her name is Cora Pearl, or maybe it's Liane de Pougy, depending on the night. Names are fluid here, like virtue. She looks at you like she's already decided how your story ends. She was born into nothing, you learn. Dirt floors, drunk fathers, that whole Dickensian starter pack. But by 18, she's seducing counts with her ankles and poets with her punctuation. She once dyed her dog to match her gown. She once served herself naked on a silver platter at a duke's dinner party. You've entered a world where reality is theater and the women direct the play. But make no mistake, power comes at a cost. As you settle into the scene, you hear a murmur of gossip float through the parlor. A duchess caught in a love triangle with her own son's tutor. A Hungarian prince who pays one courtesan just to insult him in public. These aren't just sex workers, they're performers, politicians, and sometimes weapons. Some say the French secret police kept tabs on them, afraid of what might slip between pillow talk and treason. Historians still argue whether one high-class courtesan passed naval secrets to the Germans, though maybe that's just a saucy lie told over cognac. There's a man in the corner sketching. Toulouse-Lautrec, probably. His hands tremble not from lust, but from chronic syphilis and the shakes of too much absinthe. He captures the women like ghosts, half divine, half doomed. They are immortalized in his sketchbook, but they're real. Lives vanish under powdered noses and overdue bills. Because here's the trick no one tells you. The courtesan always knows the clock is ticking. The young ones are warned. Beauty has a shelf life. And once the whispers stop, all that's left is the echo. Still tonight they shine. A girl sings Edith Piaf before Piaf is even born. A woman in emerald lingerie flips a coin between her thighs and wins a bet. You sit beside a courtesan who tells you she's just secured her 7th townhouse. She toasts to survival, but her eyes don't quite match her smile. The night is velvet and sweat and perfume. You are no longer sure where the theater ends and the truth begins. And as the gaslights dim and the room dissolves into dancing shadows, you wonder how many of these women loved, truly loved, and how many just acted well enough to survive. You wake up inside a dream stitched from gold thread and cigarette ash. It's late afternoon, but in her bedroom, time obeys no laws. The curtains are heavy, drawn tight against the outside world, and everything inside glows with a kind of tired opulence, faintly sour perfume in the air, silk sheets the color of melted butter, a half-smoked cigar still smoldering in a porcelain ashtray shaped like a swan. She lies beside you, whoever she is tonight, and yawns like a cat who owns the house. Her wig's lopsided, her kohl smudged, but her rings are real, and her hangover is louder than your heartbeat. This is not the glamour you imagined. This is what comes after. Behind every luxurious exterior of the Belle Époque courtesan was a ledger of survival. These women didn't just sip champagne from crystal flutes. They financed their own legends, often on credit. Courtesans weren't paid a salary. They were paid in fur coats, townhouses, rare jewels, and if they played their cards wrong, useless trinkets and whispered apologies. A dress could cost more than a maid's yearly wages, and it had to. Each appearance was a performance, each outing a chess move. She has to outshine wives, rivals, and actresses, even when her corset is cutting off her circulation. You notice a pile of unopened letters on the vanity. One bears a wax seal, nobleman's crest. Another is hastily torn open, revealing a note scribbled in panicked pencil. He's leaving for Cairo, or maybe for someone younger. Either way, the money's drying up. She fans herself with the letter like it's nothing, but you can see the shadow creeping behind her rouge. You're about to ask how she manages to stay afloat, but she beats you to it. Debts, she mutters, like it's a brand name. She tells you about her friend, call her Clow. She once hosted 3 barons in a single week and left them all believing they were the only one. Clow never married, never gave birth, but managed to own 3 apartments. By 30. Of course, by 32, she was hounded by creditors and forced to pawn her emeralds. One of her lovers tried to buy them back. Another married a duchess instead. One night, Clow took too much morphine and woke up 2 days later with one eyebrow shaved off and a bill for the doctor who saved her. A glamorous life, she says, but nothing here is free, not even the misery. And she laughs, a little too long, a little too loud. It's easy to forget that beneath the silk and wit and cigarette smoke, many of these women were constantly negotiating danger. One courtesan, famously adored by a Russian diplomat, was once stabbed in the thigh by him after she teased his poor French. Another was nearly thrown off a balcony for breaking off an engagement that technically never existed. Historians still argue whether the violence these women endured was simply part of the transaction, or the price of threatening the men who paid them. Either way, their beauty wasn't just a gift, it was a liability. You begin to see the architecture of their world. The rooms within rooms, the codes behind the glances. She shows you her book of ledgers hidden behind a false drawer. It's not romantic, it's math. Down payments, silk receipts, jewelry appraisals, cash loans. Some names are marked with stars. Good investments, she winks. Others are crossed out in thick ink, dead or bankrupt. There's a quiet dignity in the way she explains it, as if her survival were an art form. Maybe it is. You ask her if she's ever loved anyone. She shrugs. I've loved champagne and long baths. But then she tells you about a boy she met before all this. A violinist with a cracked tooth and perfect hands. They'd sneak into empty theaters and lie on the stage, watching the chandeliers swing in silence. He once gave her a single pearl, stolen from his sister's wedding gown. I still have it, she whispers. Not the boy, just the pearl. And then she leans back, smoke curling from her lips like a prayer, and says, he left me when I got rich. You both fall quiet. Somewhere in the hallway, someone's arguing about a missing watch. Someone else is sobbing into velvet. The world goes on, even when the money doesn't. You leave her room dizzy with perfume and the realization that nothing here is accidental. Not the angle of the mirror, not the undone ribbon, not even the sadness. Especially not the sadness. As you walk back into the Montmartre evening, past gas lamps flickering like dying stars, you wonder how many fortunes were built on these women's laughter, and how many of their debts went unpaid. You find yourself in the corner of a drawing room that smells like roses and old secrets. It's 2 a.m. and the party hasn't slowed. A man with a monocle is loudly reciting lines from Racine, and no one is listening. Your courtesan host, different from last night, but no less magnetic, leans into the arm of a velvet chaise, swirling her wine like it's a potion. She's telling a story, and the men around her are leaning in, not because they care, but because they think they'll get lucky. She knows this. She's counting on it. You realize quickly that her laughter has 5 variations: flirtatious, dismissive, drunk, calculated, and the rarest genuine. Tonight she's using the second one most. In a world that cages women in parlors and etiquette books, she's rewritten the rules. Courtesans of the Belle Époque mastered more than seduction. They mastered the art of control through performance, intellect, and timing. Every gesture was rehearsed, every line delivered with the rhythm of a seasoned actress. You watch her play piano badly and then quote Baudelaire perfectly. She leans forward and says something about the emptiness of men who only pay for bodies, but never buy time. The men laugh, thinking it's a joke. You're not so sure. Once, she says, she spent an entire winter refusing to sleep with a powerful banker until he learned to discuss impressionism without sounding like an idiot. She lasted 3 months. He caved. She made him read Proust out loud in bed. Foreplay, she calls it, sipping her drink. She once had a lover who spoke only Latin during sex. Another who insisted on being called Your Majesty while wearing socks with holes. She shrugs. Everyone's got something. You ask if she minds it. She shakes her head slowly. Men want to be conquered by someone who pretends they're not trying. I let them believe I'm soft. Then she grins. But I read Marcus Aurelius in the bath. There's a knock at the door. A man arrives with an armful of pastries and a terrified expression. She takes a cake, kisses his cheek, and sends him off without letting him speak. He owes me, she says. Not just money, gratitude. You realize this isn't just a game. It's an empire, and she's the empress. That night she tells you about a famous peer, La Belle Otero. Born poor in Spain, Otero became the obsession of kings and captains. She had a collection of tiaras and enough influence to tank stock markets with a well-timed flirtation. One rumor claims 6 men killed themselves over her. Another says she started the Balkan Wars with a misfired wink. Historians still argue whether Otero truly wielded such geopolitical power, or whether men simply hated feeling powerless around her. Either way, Otero never apologized. She called herself an artist. Men want to believe they are choosing. I just narrow the menu, she once said. The room starts to thin out. The drunk philosopher is asleep on a bearskin rug. A general is trying to dance with a lampshade. You and your hostess sit near the window, watching Paris breathe. Most men, she says softly, don't want a woman. They want a mirror. You nod. She smiles sadly. That's why we learn to be mirrors that bite. Later, in her dressing room, she shows you her collection of love letters. Some are desperate, some are poetic. One simply says, I will pay double if you wear blue. She doesn't keep them out of sentiment. She keeps them because knowledge is leverage. And leverage is the only real insurance policy. You ask if she writes back. She laughs. God, no. Mystery is my retirement plan. There's a tin box hidden in her wardrobe. Inside, clippings of her reviews, a signed photo from a Czech prince, and a folded piece of silk with bloodstains on it. You don't ask, she doesn't offer. But she says this: there's power in letting people wonder what you've survived. You can't tell if that's advice or a confession. Either way, it sticks. Before you leave, she hands you a cigarette and says, "Charm isn't about being liked, it's about being needed." Then she turns back to the mirror and wipes off half her face. The transformation is slow, meticulous. From goddess to ghost in 3 steps. As you close the door behind you, you realize you've just watched a woman unbuild herself, and it was more beautiful than any performance you've ever seen. There's a red door on Rue de la Toile that doesn't exist on any map. You knock once, and it swings open without a sound. No questions, no passwords, just a velvet-draped hallway that smells like jasmine and secrets. You follow the music, thick with strings, low with bass, into a salon glowing with candlelight. And danger. The air is warm, almost too warm, like the breath of something alive. You're not here to dance. You're here to witness. This is where courtesans rule, not from balconies or drawing rooms, but from plush divans and silk-covered beds. You're stepping into the underlayer of Belle Époque Paris, the bedroom as battlefield, the boudoir as boardroom. Inside, everything is soft, velvet cushions, muffled laughter, bodies that move like smoke. One courtesan called Feliky tonight, though last week she was Morale, leads you through the crowd like a cat walking a tightrope. She whispers, "No shoes past the carpet," and no names. Someone's playing the harp in the corner. Another girl is painting a man's chest with melted chocolate. But no one flinches. Here, nothing is shocking unless you're boring. You're shown into a private chamber, curtains drawn, candlelight flickering against gold wallpaper. The bed takes up most of the room. On it, a duke and a famous actress, tangled together in a pose too complex to describe. They laugh when they see you, not out of shame, but because in this world, shame is a foreign language. Feliky settles beside you on a fur throw and begins to explain how the room works. Not just the space, but the power. These velvet chambers weren't just about pleasure, they were the quiet heart of influence. Gentlemen paid to be unmade, undone, observed. Some craved humiliation, others demanded fantasy. One famously powerful man, a politician you'd recognize, only visited if he could wear lace and be sung to sleep in Italian. Another cried every time he was touched, whispering apologies to a wife he'd abandoned in Lyon. Courtesans didn't just undress bodies, they dismantled masks. And they learned everything. One woman, known only as La Rouse, became the favored companion of a naval officer. Over 6 months, she learned fleet routes, security protocols, and diplomatic tensions. When she disappeared, a week later a merchant ship was sunk in the Atlantic, and people whispered her name like a storm. Historians still argue whether she was a spy or just heartbreak with good timing. Either way, someone paid dearly for loving her. You watch Feliky light a long, slender cigarette. She leans back and tells you about the night she played chess in the nude with a Swedish banker who wept when she beat him. Another time, she was paid to seduce 2 rival industrialists, only to leave them both for their shared valet. Power, she says, blowing smoke in slow loops, isn't taken. It's teased out. You look around the room. Every object here feels placed, chosen. The mirror tilted to catch reflections just so. The perfume bottle designed like a weapon. Even the shadows seem choreographed. One girl enters wearing only a peacock feather fan. Another exits with a man who looks dazed, like he survived a minor religion. This is not chaos. This is choreography. The stories in this room could level governments or inspire operas. One man, red-faced, sweating, begs to be ignored while 3 women read poetry to each other. Another insists on being called Colonel, though everyone knows he sells flowers by day. They indulge him, not out of kindness, but because his fantasy pays for their opera tickets. You ask Feliki if she ever gets tired of the performance. She shrugs. I don't perform. I curate. Then she takes your hand and guides you toward a hidden door behind the bookshelf. A narrow hallway opens into a quieter room. Candles flicker low. The bed here is smaller, the air thicker. This is for truths, she whispers. Not everyone can handle it. She shows you a scar beneath. Her rib, pale and clean. Angry lover, she says. Said I knew too much. You ask why she still does this. Her smile is tired. Because in here, I am more real than any duchess in Versailles. You sit in silence, the weight of her words heavier than the silk she wears. Outside, someone laughs. A woman cries out in pleasure or rage. It's hard to tell. Paris breathes around you. And you understand now. The private chambers weren't hidden for shame. They were hidden for safety, for strategy, for survival. As you leave the room, the scent of jasmine clings to your collar. You'll never be able to smell it again without remembering this place, this power, this woman who used soft pillows, and sharp glances to rewrite the rules of who gets to own desire. You think you've seen everything perfumed seduction. Diamond-encrusted schemes, silk sheets heavy with secrets, but then you're handed a mask, not a metaphorical one. An actual feathered, gold-laced Venetian thing with ribbons and sequins. That itch your temples. No mask, no entry, says the man at the iron gate, as if this were a sacred ritual and not just another Tuesday night in Paris. You tie it on. Behind the gate lies an estate that looks like Versailles' naughty cousin. Lamps flicker along the gravel path, throwing long shadows over marble statues that seem to watch you pass. You hear the music before you see the people, violins, laughter. The unmistakable sound of champagne being poured into something expensive. Then the garden explodes into view. It's not a party. It's a fever dream. Courtesans and aristocrats, actresses and ambassadors, all gliding through the hedges like ghosts in technicolor. Costumes swirl, some dressed as gods, others as peasants. One woman wears nothing but a crown and body paint. A man, naked except for a cape, reads aloud from the Kama Sutra in broken French. You blink and someone feeds you a fig. Welcome to the masquerade. In the Belle Époque, these events were the court of last resort, orgies masquerading as philosophy salons, political summits disguised as poetry readings. Here, titles didn't matter. The Marquis danced with the baker's daughter. The Cardinal shared opium with a drag performer dressed as Joan of Arc. The only rule was discretion, and even that was negotiable. Tonight's hostess is a courtesan who goes by the name of Marguerite, but everyone calls her the General. Not because she served in the military, but because she commands every eye, every whisper, every movement. You watch her glide through the crowd, her gown trailing behind her like a royal decree. Men bow, women curtsy. Even the drunk ones remember their manners. Marguerite once staged an entire evening where her guests pretended to be 18th century nobles. It ended with someone dueling over a wig and two ambassadors signing a trade agreement. You ask her how she pulls it off. She smiles and says, "Power is just theater where the actors never break character." That night, you see things no history book would dare mention. A bishop confesses to a chorus girl while she chain smokes. In silence, a famous general kisses the boots of a woman dressed as Napoleon. A banker offers a diamond to anyone who can make his wife laugh. No one succeeds. But the courtesans? They move through it all like seasoned diplomats. They know every scandal before it breaks, every lover before he proposes. One woman tells you about the night she ended up in a love triangle with two rival politicians and convinced them both to fund her vineyard. "They thought they were buying my affection," she says, sipping from a glass shaped like a swan. "I was buying land." Another tells you she once hosted a scent party where each guest wore a unique perfume and the game was seduction by smell alone. You ask if anyone fell in love. She replies, only the ones who couldn't afford it. The night thickens. A storm threatens. Someone starts playing piano under a tree. You duck into the hedge maze, guided by lanterns and the promise of mischief. There, you find two lovers, barely clothed, arguing about Nietzsche. One of them is crying. The other is wearing lipstick smeared across his collarbone. It's absurd, theatrical, and completely real. Because in this world, even heartbreak is curated. You finally return to the courtyard where a performer breathes fire while reciting erotic poetry. Marguerite stands beside you. She doesn't speak, just watches. The flames rise. You know, she says eventually, the newspapers call us dangerous. You nod. She turns to you, suddenly serious. But we don't burn things down. We just light them up so people can see the rot. Historians still argue whether these masquerades were harmless hedonism or subversive rebellion. But one thing is clear. The courtesans knew how to use chaos. Not just to entertain, but to expose, to manipulate, to survive. As the party begins to fade and dawn threatens the sky, you peel off your mask. Your skin is sweaty, your mind foggy. Marguerite takes it from your hands and whispers, "Don't worry, love. The mask is always you. You just finally saw it." And with that, she disappears into the garden, her laughter trailing behind like incense in a cathedral of sin. You wake up on a velvet chaise with glitter in your hair and a throat full of secrets. The party is long over, and Paris is yawning under a sleepy haze. But you're not going home yet. A different kind of curtain rises now, the one that separates the stage from the dressing room, the performance from the reality. Daylight is unforgiving, especially for women who live by candlelight. You're escorted, quietly, through the back corridors of the Opera Garnier. No velvet gowns here, no diamonds or cigarettes. Just creaking floorboards, chipped mirrors, and the scent of talcum powder fighting a losing battle against old sweat. She appears without fanfare, your guide into this dimmer world. Her stage name is Yvette Montalier, but her birth certificate says Jean. On stage, she plays doomed heroines who die for love. Off stage, she wakes up alone in a cold apartment 3 floors above a bakery. She limps slightly, a souvenir from a fall 2 years ago. The audience never sees the limp, she says. The corset hides everything. By night, she's a goddess. By morning, she's nursing a hangover with watered-down coffee and hoping her hairpiece sells at the pawn shop. You walk with her through narrow streets where courtesans become civilians. Gone are the elaborate wigs and coquettish laughs. Here they carry laundry in baskets and groceries in shame. Their neighbors pretend not to recognize them in daylight, as if modesty can be reconstructed by averting one's eyes. You ask if that bothers her. Of course, she replies, but I'd rather be ignored than pitied. The city is different in the light. The cafes smell more of burnt toast than perfume. Street urchins mimic can-can kicks behind your back. And yet, even here, the echo of glamour clings to the women like a fading scent. Yvette takes you to a quiet cemetery. Some of us get buried here, she says. Others just vanish. She points to a nameless stone, worn smooth by time. She was a queen once, now nothing. The illusion was never meant to last. One woman, she tells you, died surrounded by gowns too expensive to burn and too stained to sell. Another drowned herself after her patron married someone who could read Latin. Historians still argue whether courtesans were empowered rebels or simply well-decorated victims of a rigged game. The truth is messier. Some of them played to win. Others were just trying not to drown. There's a story she hesitates to tell, but eventually does. A friend of hers, Simone Bright, young, talented, had the voice of an angel and the spine of a saint. She was rising fast, catching the eyes of producers and poets. One night, she disappeared. Days later, her body was found beneath the pont Neuf, dressed in a gown she had worn to a gala weeks before. No suicide note, no explanation. Just an empty perfume bottle clutched in her hand. They said it was heartbreak. Yvette isn't so sure. Maybe it was exhaustion, she says. This. Life wears through people like silk against stone. You try to imagine the parties, the applause, the bouquets thrown at her feet, and then the silence that followed. You realize the most dangerous thing in this world isn't scandal, or disease, or even violence. It's the silence. The absence of attention. The vanishing. There's a reason courtesans wrote memoirs, even if they had to exaggerate. A reason they posed for painters and photographers. Immortality was the only real revenge. Yvette takes you back to her apartment 3. Rooms, one of which is filled entirely with costumes. She picks up a pink tutu, looks at it, and says, "Too young for me now." Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. In the corner is a small box filled with faded letters, each one folded with care. She reads one aloud. A love note. Nothing special. But the way she reads it slowly, reverently, you can tell it meant everything. You ask her if she'd do it all again. She thinks about it, long and hard. Yes, she says finally. But I'd save more money and love fewer poets. That night, she prepares for another performance. The makeup is heavier now, the corset tighter. She pins her wig with practiced speed and checks the mirror one last time. You never let them see the cracks, she tells you. They're paying for marble. And with that, she steps onto the stage, into the light, and becomes someone else again. You're halfway through a glass of cognac that tastes like betrayal when she leans in, lowers her voice, and says, "There's something you should know. Not all of us were just here for the pleasure." Her fingers trace the rim of her glass, slow and deliberate, like she's deciding how much truth you can handle. The candle flickers. The music in the next room fades. Some of us were listening, watching, writing things down. You blink. Spy, informant, or just an unusually observant romantic. She smiles like a woman who's memorized state secrets and bedroom confessions in the same breath. In Belle Époque Paris, where borders bled and alliances shifted like the hemline of a scandalous dress, not every courtesan was just a decorative accessory to a man's ambition. Some had ambitions of their own, and they knew that the softest pillow was often where the loudest truth was whispered. Her name, she tells you, was once whispered in foreign embassies. Men thought she was theirs. They had no idea who was really listening. She shows you a locked drawer. Inside, letters in German, scraps of coded poetry, a handkerchief stitched with a military crest. He thought it was just foreplay, she says. I was translating troop movements. She doesn't say which side she worked for. Maybe France. Maybe not. Historians still argue whether one of the most famous courtesans of the era passed intelligence to the Russians, or if she merely enjoyed writing fake reports to manipulate her lovers. The truth? She says nothing more. But you see the glint in her eye, the thrill of power that isn't bought but earned. In one corner of the room sits a photograph of a man in uniform. He loved me, she says. I lied to him. Then, after a pause, he lied to his country. Seems fair. She tells you about another courtesan blonde, radiant, a favorite of half the German consulate. No one paid her much attention, until one morning a railway exploded and 3 names were quietly removed from the guest lists of future soirees. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. What's certain is this: power slips easier into silks than into suits. Courtesans were underestimated precisely because they weren't supposed to matter. But they mattered. A lot. One, she says, used to carve initials into her bedpost for every secret she collected. Some nights she'd run her fingers over them and whisper names like prayers. Another pretended to be illiterate, so men would speak freely around her. In reality, she kept a coded journal so well encrypted that scholars still haven't cracked it. You ask her why no one remembers these women as more than lovers. She looks at you with something close to pity, because no one wants to admit they were outplayed in bed. Her voice turns sharp for a moment. Men write the history books. We just make sure they dream about us while doing it. In her dresser is a pistol small silver, unregistered. For emergencies, she says, or if someone gets too curious. You don't ask if she's ever used it. You don't have to. The room suddenly feels colder. She lights a cigarette, exhales. Slowly, I don't miss him, she says of the man in the photo. I miss the leverage. You're not sure what to say. So she changes the subject, asks if you've ever blackmailed someone for information. You shake your head. She nods. It's like foreplay, but with bank accounts. That night she takes you to a different kind of salon. One where the mirrors are two-way and the velvet wallpaper peels just enough to suggest microphones. A Russian diplomat enters. A Belgian industrialist follows. Neither sees you, but she does. She places a hand on your arm and whispers, "Watch this." She laughs in just the right tone, touches the diplomat's shoulder with perfect timing, offers the industrialist a cigarette. In 20 minutes, she knows where they're traveling, who they've slept with, and what fears keep them awake. None of it feels forced. She's an artist. They never see the net until they're all ready. In it. Later, she writes it all down in a small black book, closes it, and hides it behind a loose tile in the fireplace. You ask what happens if she's ever caught. Then I disappear, she says. And someone else takes my place. There's always another woman. Always another secret. And just like that, she vanishes into the smoke, leaving you with a fresh understanding that history isn't written in ink. It's whispered in bed, traded over wine, and stored behind the eyes of a woman who knows too much. You follow the scent of aging perfume into a shop that shouldn't exist. It's tucked between a tax office and a forgotten bakery. Its windows so dusty you nearly walk past. Inside, time holds its breath. The wallpaper peels in delicate curls. Faded portraits of women you almost recognize half remembered from paintings. Rumors and dreams watch you from the walls. And in the back, behind a counter cluttered with vintage fans and tarnished hairpins, she waits. Her name is Madame E, and her eyes are older than electricity. Looking for something? She asks, voice like silk spun through gravel. Or someone? She doesn't smile, but gestures to a chair, and you sit. Around her are relics. A corset laced so tight, it looks like it could still contain breath. A single satin slipper cracked with age, and a perfume bottle shaped like a dagger. These belong to queens of the night, she says, dusting the bottle with a cloth that might be older than you. Women who built kingdoms from kisses and crumbled beneath chandeliers. You ask where they are now. She nods toward a locked drawer. Ashes, she says, or legends. It's the end of the Belle Époque, and Paris doesn't mourn them with parades or plaques. It forgets them like a party no one wants to admit went too far. The world shifted, new wars, new morals, new markets. The courtesans who once ruled opera boxes and inked headlines are now whispers, outpaced by telephones and typewriters. One died penniless in a rented attic, clutching a painting of herself no museum wanted. Another opened a beauty salon under a fake name, touching faces that didn't know her hands once caressed kings. The city they once ruled now laughs at them, or worse, ignores them. Madame E tells you of one final soirée, thrown in defiance as Paris modernized. Electric lights. Instead of gas, jazz instead of string quartets. Only a handful came. The rest had married, disappeared, or died. They danced anyway, laughed louder than the silence around them, toasted to memory with cheap wine in crystal glasses. It wasn't elegance, she says, but it was real. The perfumes on the shelves have names like Minuit Désir and Dernier Soupir, Last Desire. Final Sigh. They no longer sell. Too old-fashioned. Too much like history. And yet, When she lets you smell one rich, musky, with notes of leather and violets, you swear you hear distant laughter, the click of heels on marble, the rustle of silk sheets. You ask if she misses them. I miss the danger, she says. The delicious uncertainty of being both wanted and feared. Then she shows you her keepsakes. An old invitation with a lipstick kiss, a broken opera glass, a love letter written in invisible ink. She reads it aloud. The words are ordinary, but her voice makes them sacred. You try to imagine what it was like when desire was a currency, when women without names rewrote men's fates over dessert, when being remembered was the only way to win. Now, she says, people swipe right and call it love. They trade photos instead of favors. No one whispers anymore. You ask her why she kept all this. She shrugs. Because someone had to. She leads you to a final room, dimly lit, wallpaper faded to a blush of ghosts. In the center sits a single chair. On it, a corset, a feathered mask, and a handwritten note that simply says, "For the last courtesan, it's not for sale." She tells you, it's a reminder. A silence settles. Not heavy, just full. She leans in close. You think they're gone. But they're not. They're in perfume ads. In songs sung off-key in the shower. In the way someone raises an eyebrow, holds a gaze, says, "Come here," without speaking. She taps your chest. They're in here. If you've ever wanted something so badly it ached, then lost it, you've carried them too. Outside, Paris hums with new life. Tourists, traffic, touchscreen menus. You step into the street and everything feels thinner, faster, louder. But for a moment, the air smells like violets. And you understand. The courtesans may be gone, but their fingerprints remain on every mirrored surface, every whispered lie, every love that costs a little more than it should. They were never just decoration. They were architects of desire, cartographers of power. And though the world has changed, though their names have faded, the echo of their laughter still lingers. In every place, someone forgets their dignity for a glimpse of magic. End of script. Sweet dreams.